Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back to Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs, and in this next segment, we're going to be listening to the WHO, and they will have the Secretary General for the United Nations, as well as Jonas Starr, and others talking about what is happening in the world with COVID-19 and other health issues concerning global health, as well as human rights issues and things like that. They are going to be outlining the financial framework for the ACT Accelerator and how much it's actually going to cost to build this whole thing out, so that the vaccines and medical devices needed to help with COVID-19 can be shared globally, even with those countries that are not industrialized. It is reported that it will cost about $2 billion U.S., and it will save many lives and also help address the threat of Omicron and prevent even more dangerous variants from emerging, according to the media reports from the WHO. So let's listen to what Dr. Tedros, the Secretary General from the United Nations, and the rest of them actually have to say in this next press conference.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very, very special ACT Accelerator event calling for fair share financing of the ACT Accelerator. And just to emphasize how much global commitment and need for this is, we have a stellar panel lined up today. They will be introduced, each one in turn, by Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, our WHO Director General, but the speakers are His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa, who's also the co-chair of the ACT Accelerator, His Excellency Jonas Støre, Prime Minister of Norway, who is also co-chair of the ACT Accelerator, His Excellency Joko Widodo, President of Indonesia, His Excellency Hajit Sajjan, Minister of International Development, Canada, His Excellency Xavier Bisera, Secretary of Health and Human Services, United States, His Excellency Fahad bin Abdulrahman Al Jalajal, Minister of Health, Saudi Arabia, His Excellency Nils, Annan, Parliamentary State Secretary, Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Germany, and His Excellency Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne, Minister Delegate for Tourism, French Nationals Abroad and Francophonie, France. And of course, as I said, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the Director General for the World Health Organization, will give the opening remarks and introduce the panel. So over to you, Dr. Tedros.
Thank you, Margareta. Your Excellency Jonas Støre, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Depending on where you live, it might feel like the COVID-19 pandemic is almost over, or it might feel like it is at its worst. But wherever you live, COVID isn't finished with us. There's no borders. And as we all know from Omicron, any feeling of safety can change in a moment. We know this virus will continue to evolve. But we're not defenseless. We have the tools to prevent this disease, to test for it, and to treat it. Where people have access to those tools, this virus can be brought under control. Where they don't, this virus continues to spread, to evolve, and to kill. The biggest barrier we face to ending the pandemics as a global health emergency is ensuring all people in every country have access to those tools. The ACT Accelerator is vital for this mission. As outlined in the financing framework we're launching today, the ACT Accelerator requires $23 billion to save lives, address the threat of Omicron, and prevent even more dangerous variants emerging. That includes an urgent financing gap of $16 billion for the ACT Accelerator itself, with the remaining $6.5 billion to be self-financed by middle-income countries supported by multilateral development banks. We call on all higher-income countries to play their part in fully funding the ACT Accelerator and ending the pandemic as a global health emergency. The financing framework sets out fair share targets based on countries' gross domestic product, income per capita, and other factors. We're grateful to all donors to the ACT Accelerator, especially those who exceeded the fair share contribution. The funds we need are significant, but significantly less than the monthly economic costs of the pandemic. We have a plan. We have the tools. We have hope. Now we need the resources to execute the plan everywhere, make the tools available everywhere, and make hope a reality everywhere. I thank you. And I'm now delighted, as Margarita said, to welcome all our guests today, special guests, and I would like to welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations, my dear friend and colleague, Antonio Guterres, for opening remarks. SG, you have the floor.
Excellencies, Dieteros, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to join all of you to launch this resource mobilization campaign for the ACT Accelerator. And I thank you for putting the focus on fairness. If we want to ensure vaccinations for everyone to end this pandemic, we must first inject fairness into the system. We are entering the third year of the pandemic, and the world is still far from meeting crucial targets. To vaccinate the globe, to increase testing, to make life-saving effective treatments available for all who need it, to protect our frontline healthcare workers with quality PPE. Vaccine inequity is the biggest moral failure of our times, and people and countries are paying the price. The good news is that recent progress shows how we can deliver when we have the resources and come together. Vaccine supply and rollout is ramping up exponentially, and we are making up for lost time in many countries. To end the end of this pandemic can be within our sights this year. We can get the economic recovery back on track and rescue the Sustainable Development Goals. But we need to act now. Vaccines, tests, and effective treatments are available. Yet many low and middle-income countries are still not getting enough of these pandemic-ending tools to protect their families and communities and our world. Until and unless we can ensure access to these tools, the pandemic will not go away, and the sense of insecurity of people will only deepen. We have the systems to accelerate the rollout of these essential tools. The UN family has decades of experience working with countries and communities in crisis. UN agencies, led by WHO and UNICEF, have the know-how to help governments turn vaccines into vaccination, tests into testing, and treatments into effective clinical care for patients. But we cannot access the tools without first accessing the resources to support countries to achieve global vaccination testing and treatment targets. The ACT Accelerator provides a costed, coordinated, and credible path out of the COVID-19 pandemic for everyone, everywhere. And this needs to be financed by fair share contributions from countries. Above all, we need urgent investment in timely vaccine delivery and increasing testing. And this is a matter of fairness, but also it's a matter of justice, and it is a matter of plain old common sense. We can end the pandemic this year. We have the pathway to get there, but we can only get there together. It is all up to us, and it all comes down to fairness. Thank you, and I wish this meeting the best possible success to the benefit of humankind.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Secretary General, for your leadership and commitment, and to the whole United Nations family for the steadfast commitment. In today's event, we will hear from political leaders from across the world on priority actions to reach the global COVID-19 response targets and achieve equitable access to COVID-19 tools everywhere. I would like to welcome the ACT Accelerator Council co-chairs, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. The co-chairs have over the last almost 2 years shown great leadership in championing the agenda of equitable access to vaccines, tests, treatments, and PPE. I'm grateful for their leadership. We will first hear from the President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, and the floor is yours.
Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Co-Chair of ACT A and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway, Mr. Jonas Støre, ACT A members and friends, ladies and gentlemen, today we face a stark reality as we enter the third year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Scientific advances that have brought us incredible innovation, including new tests in weeks, repurposed treatments in months, and COVID-19 vaccines in less than a year after the first cases were reported. However, huge inequities persist in accessing these tools. Rich countries have administered 14 times more doses of life-saving vaccines and carried out 80 times more tests than their low-income counterparts. In Africa, just 8% of people are fully vaccinated. As wealthier nations roll out third and even fourth booster doses, health workers and older people across the African continent remain unprotected. Problems such as lack of oxygen, medicines, and personal protective equipment in developing countries is costing lives by the day as countries grapple with fresh waves of infection driven by the Omicron variant. This inequity is one of the greatest injustices of our time and must be overcome. In 2020, we came together to develop and ensure equitable access to the life-saving tools that are needed to combat COVID-19. The result of this groundbreaking collaboration of global health agencies, governments, civil society, and other private sector entities was the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator. South Africa has proudly co-chaired the ACT Accelerator Facilitation Council since its inception. We will continue to champion this initiative as the best solution to the inequalities and inequities the world and Africa in particular faces. Investments in ACT Accelerator have funded critical research and development of vaccines, tests, and new treatments, with the billionth dose of COVAX vaccines arriving in Rwanda last month. The partnership has also driven access to rapid testing, treatments, and PPE through its 10 constituent agencies. 80% of the total supply of vaccines to low-income countries has come through COVAX, and 80% of tests performed in more than 20 countries were delivered through the ACT Accelerator. Now, the ACT Accelerator needs urgent funding to get the job done. The funding gap of $16.2 billion pales in comparison to what the developed economies have spent on their domestic responses. As co-chairs, South Africa and Norway have written to more than 50 heads of state and government asking them to contribute their fair share of financing to ACT Accelerator agencies. This funding is vital if we achieve the global targets for access to vaccines, tests, treatments, and PPE, and of ending the pandemic in 2022. The longer inequitable access to COVID-19 tools persists, the longer the pandemic will persist. I urge my fellow leaders to step up in solidarity and to contribute their country's fair share. The end of this pandemic is in sight, but only if we act together for equity and for solidarity. This is the time when we should leave no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you so much, President Ramaphosa, for your continued commitment to the ACT Accelerator and for your leadership for Africa and the world over the past 2 years. Now, I would like to welcome Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre, a champion of global health and ACT Accelerator Facilitation Council, co-chair. Prime Minister Støre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. Let me see. Thank you, Dr. Tedros. Thank you, Secretary General, for being with us. And let me, before I start, salute your staff, Director General. WHO is now playing a key role, convening us and being available to people around the world with your skills and leadership. So I would like to salute all your collaborators at this moment. 2 years into the pandemic, the virus is spreading faster than ever before. Some countries think that we are closer to the end, but as a globe and as a human community, we are still extremely vulnerable. Hundreds of millions of people have been infected, and trillions of dollars have been spent on mitigation. We see that the pandemic has increased existing inequities between and within countries, as the Director General and President Ramaphosa underlined. To me, it is evident that the pandemic has not just caused a health crisis, it has led to an economic crisis, a social crisis, and therefore also potentially a security crisis. We are in a different place now from where we were a year ago, and of course 2 years ago. Vaccines and treatments are available. That's a miracle in comparison with the long timescales we've seen in the past. That is encouraging. The Omicron variant is less severe than previous variants. That is comforting, but it is spreading. But inequity in access to COVID-19 tools continues to undermine our collective efforts to end the pandemic. So while we all long for the pandemic to be over, it seems more likely that we must get used to a new normal. The virus keeps evolving. You tell us, WHO, that is what happens when people go unvaccinated. And we do not know what kind of new variants will emerge. In my country, we were surprised by Omicron. We took measures, and it really was an upsetting experience. Another wave may again threaten our societies or require new or modified vaccines or treatments. So it is essential that we are able to adapt our collective response, nothing less. We must respond to the current challenges and prepare ourselves for possibly new variants and new waves. So, with my co-chair, Mr. President, Mr. Ramaphosa, we agree that this new reality simply underscores the need for global solidarity, and that ACT A is our best bet in this interdependent world. As co-chairs of ACT A, President Ramaphosa and I have written to many leaders, taken many phone calls, asked for many appointments, and I take this opportunity to call upon high-income and upper-middle-income countries to commit their fair share to ensure a fully financed ACT A. It is really our best strategy and our best method of succeeding. And remember that WHO in the past has led campaigns of funding vaccines, essential medicines, and it really has delivered fantastic results. All political leaders must now do what they can to close this financing gap. We know that unless COVID-19 tools become available to all, it is no mystery, infection rates will stay high, and patients, health systems, and economies will suffer. And new viral strains may evolve, posing a threat to all of us once again. So investing in ACT A is the mutual interest of all countries. It needs to be brought to the attention of the meetings that are coming up in G20, G7, and other circles. And I salute the Secretary General for raising this issue in all UN contexts available. Because this is an equity imperative. It is sound economic policy. It promotes global health security and, as I said, global public good. We must achieve a fully financed ACT A as soon as possible. There is an urgent need for $16.8 billion US dollars from donors, in addition to domestic funding and development bank funding. My country and my government in Norway remains committed in doing its part. In December, at the very last end of our budget, we announced that we would provide another $220 million US dollars to ACT A. And I call on other countries to contribute their fair share and to do it as a matter of urgency. Together, we know we can fully finance ACT A. And if we do that, we can respond to the ongoing crisis and make sure that we are better prepared for whatever the future holds. Until the day everyone is protected, all of us are vulnerable. So let's make this last stretch possible. I thank President Ramaphosa for his solidarity and friendship. I thank the Secretary General and you, Dr. Tedros. Good luck, and let's make every effort to succeed. Thank you very much.
Tusen takk, Your Excellency Prime Minister Støre, for your words, and tusen takk to the people of Norway and your government for the generous contributions to ACT A's work, and for exceeding actually your fair share contribution in the last ACT A budget cycle, and for leading the way with your contributions to this one. Now I would like to now warmly welcome President Joko Widodo of Indonesia, who through the presidency of the G20 is supporting the ACT Accelerator and is committed to regularly review progress and ensure we're all doing our part. Indonesia's leadership will be vital in the fight to end this pandemic.
Director General of WHO, thank you for your invitation. I highly appreciate the role of the ACT A in promoting development and equitable access to COVID-19 treatments, diagnostic, equipment, and vaccines. ACTA is an important part of the global health architecture, as well as concrete proof of the benefit of multilateralism. Going forward, the role of ACTA is still very much required, including to bridge the global vaccination gap. No one is safe until everyone is. I invite countries and donors to use the opportunity to strengthen their support for ACTA. As current president of the G20, Indonesia has made strengthening global health architecture as one of the priority agenda. Our world must be better prepared and responsive to health crisis. Each country should have the same opportunity to prepare for the threat of future pandemics. Various improvements need to be made. Strengthening the capacity of developing countries must receive special attention. At the same time, developing countries must also be empowered as a solution. Developing countries should be part of supply chains for medicine, vaccines, and medical equipment. For this, cooperation in research, investment, and transfer of technology is vital. Solidarity and cooperation will be our key to exit the pandemic and build a more resilient global health architecture. The role of G20 is crucial in building global health architecture, including in promoting health financing for developing countries. Recover together, recover stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, President Widodo, for your leadership in G20 and your vision for future of global health. I'm now delighted to welcome the Minister of International Development of Canada, Harjit Sajjan. Canada is a strong supporter of the ACT Accelerator and leads by example, having contributed their fair share in 2021. Over to you, Minister Sajjan.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by acknowledging that I'm here speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. No single country on earth can tackle this pandemic on their own, which is why I join all of you to work towards increasing access to essential COVID-19 tools for everyone. Now I'm talking about tests, treatments, and crucially, vaccines. Because by vaccinating everyone, we can end this pandemic. And the ACT Accelerator is the global solution to end this pandemic in 2022. Now, we have known this from the beginning, which is why Canada has invested over $1.3 billion in the ACT Accelerator. And though over 100 low and middle income countries have received shipments of vaccines, we know that vaccines are not enough. We also need to ensure every country, every person has access to stronger testing, treatments including oxygen and more PPE. We need to work together to close the equity gaps between countries. This fight is not over, but we can get there if we work together. All of us can do our part, our fair share, from the G7 to the G20 to the private sector. Unless everyone meaningfully contributes, any return to normality may be short-lived. And today we are calling for a new global solidarity, a solidarity against this virus, so that everyone everywhere has equitable access to all COVID-19 tools. We must all work together to end this pandemic, and that means fully funding the ACT Accelerator. It is our best bet to make sure that 2022 is the year we finally end this pandemic. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Minister Sajjan, for both your words and Canada's partnership, and also, as I repeat, for contributing your fair share. The United States is the largest contributor to ACT Accelerator. President Biden hosted the Global COVID-19 Summit during the UN General Assembly last year and have played a key role in fostering international collaboration to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We look forward to the continued leadership of President Biden and the follow-up summit, where countries will have an opportunity to step up and make new commitments to the ACT Accelerator. I'm now delighted to welcome United States Secretary of Human and Health Services, Mr. Xavier Bisera, who will provide remarks by video.
Excellencies, distinguished heads of state and government, distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of President Joe Biden and the United States, I'm Xavier Bisera, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's a privilege to speak to you today about the Biden-Harris administration's deep commitment to tackling the COVID-19 pandemic and preparing for what it could be tomorrow. That includes supporting the goals and mission of the ACT Accelerator collaboration. Equity is essential in our fight against COVID-19. That's why the United States is proud to support ACT-A as a key global collaboration to facilitate equitable access across the world to vaccines, diagnostics, therapeutics, and other key tools against COVID-19. Under President Biden's leadership, we vowed to donate 1.2 billion doses of safe and effective vaccines to the world, and additionally to provide more than $1.7 billion in funding to help get shots into arms. And we're on track to do that. Over the past year, our nation has donated more than 420 million vaccine doses to 112 countries around the world, with the vast majority of these through COVAX, the ACT-A vaccines pillar. We all have a part to play, and we must all do our part. This is a time for every country to step up against this virus, to mitigate the harm of new variants, and end this pandemic. We look forward to working with every country as we step forward together to support ACT-A's efforts to help vaccinate the world. Together, we can ensure access to oxygen, authorized therapeutics, tests, and other critical medical products. We look forward to working with ACT-A and other partners around the world, notably in advance of the next global COVID-19 summit. Thank you for the work you are doing to advance the health and well-being of people around the globe. If this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that public health doesn't end at our borders. All of us are at risk, and all of us must respond to turn the tide. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Bisera, for your words and for your leadership. I would now like to introduce the Saudi Arabian Minister of Health, Mr. Fahad bin Abdulrahman Al-Jalajil, who will provide remarks by video.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Majesty, the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdulaziz, I would like to extend our appreciation to the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, for his initiation of the launch of the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator Advocacy Campaign for 2022. This is a critical event that highlights the importance of a global solidarity toward effective initiatives that are aimed at tackling this pandemic. Since the beginning of the pandemic and during the Kingdom's presidency of the G20 in 2020, the custodian of the two holy mosques called for an extraordinary leader summit to amplify the importance of a global effort and to emphasize the importance of unifying international support to address the pandemic. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been a strong advocate for the ACT Accelerator since its inception and has supported the initiative and the COVAX facility by its contribution of $500 million to ensure equitable access to diagnostic, therapeutics, and vaccine globally, and most importantly, to the countries who need it the most. The Kingdom has also supported low and middle income countries through direct funding and support through the King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center totaling to $833 million throughout the pandemic. We applaud the work done by the organization to accelerate efforts toward tackling this pandemic and highlight the importance of this global initiative as its principles are built on the fundamental values of transparency, research, and evidence. We believe that the ACT Accelerator is the best tool to combat this pandemic and the main platform to reach the countries who need the most support, and has the capability to immunize the largest number of the world's population against this virus. Lastly, the Kingdom continues to work closely with the World Health Organization and all relevant entities in an effort to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, and we stand committed to offer our full support throughout this campaign and future ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Abdulrahman Al-Jalajil, and thank you also for showing such strong commitment to the ACT Accelerator, including fulfilling Saudi Arabia's fair share target to the ACT Accelerator last year. Now, I would like to welcome Nils Annan, Parliamentary State Secretary, Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development from Germany. Germany is a strong supporter of ACT Accelerator and has prioritized ACT-A in its G7 presidency program announced by Chancellor Olaf. Germany also contributed its fair share to ACT-A last year. Mr. Annan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. I am very pleased to speak to you on behalf of the German Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Svenja Schulze, and of course I send warm wishes from Chancellor Scholz, who unfortunately cannot join us here today. I will not hide my concern. Last year, we, as global community, struggled to provide ACT-A with sufficient funding. This year must be different if we are truly to defeat the pandemic. There is no doubt that Germany bears a special responsibility as the G7 presidency. Germany is currently the second largest donor with a contribution of 2.2 billion euros, and we intend to again contribute our fair share in 2022. I would like to invite all of you to do likewise. It is encouraging that global vaccine production is now growing at an increasingly rapid pace. We urgently need this in order to supply all countries equitably. That said, we see huge problems with absorption capacities on the ground. Currently, our biggest challenge is to get vaccines into the arms. Also, life-saving supplies such as oxygen, medicines, and PPEs now need to get quickly to where they are needed the most. Germany, ladies and gentlemen, will significantly step up its support in this regard, both multilaterally and through accompanying bilateral support. I am pleased that WHO, Gavi, UNICEF are taking charge of coordinating efforts both in the capitals and on the ground. Even though we are still in the middle of an acute pandemic, we also must look ahead. Our ambition is to be better prepared in the future, and Germany and its development cooperation is already investing 500 million euros into vaccine manufacturing in Africa, especially Ghana, Rwanda, Senegal, and South Africa. And you already know that the company BioNTech is planning to start the construction of manufacturing facilities in Africa around mid-year in the same countries that I mentioned. This private sector engagement goes hand in hand with our close cooperation with the governments concerned. Moreover, Germany, together with the European Union, France, and other partners, is supporting the WHO mRNA hub in its effort to develop mRNA vaccines under its own auspices. This is a major joint effort, bringing all public and private partners together. Thus, we have the potential not only to overcome this crisis, but to emerge strengthened from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vielen Dank, Secretary Annan, and thank you to Germany for the continued support to ACT Accelerator. France, with President Macron, has been a great champion of ACT Accelerator and helped launch this unique global collaboration almost 2 years ago. Through the EU presidency, France is leading on ensuring equitable access to COVID-19 tools across the world. I'm delighted to welcome Minister Delegate Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne to provide remarks.
Monsieur le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Mesdames et Messieurs, pour la première fois depuis le début de la crise sanitaire, nous entrevoyons le bout du tunnel, grâce aux efforts de tous, aux politiques de vaccination, au civisme aussi. Pour autant, le virus fait encore ressentir sa morsure. Et sans surprise, ce sont les plus vulnérables qui sont les plus touchés. Des pays dont le système de santé est peut-être plus fragile, notamment sur le continent africain. Les populations les plus exposées, les réfugiés notamment. Et face à cela, nous devons agir fort, agir juste, agir ensemble. Depuis le début de l'année 2020, nous nous sommes mobilisés de manière inédite pour apporter la seule réponse qui vaille, une réponse multilatérale, globale et solidaire. C'est l'initiative ACT A que la France, sous l'impulsion du président de la République Emmanuel Macron, a lancée de concert avec l'OMS et la Commission européenne autour d'un objectif fort, développer, produire et donner accès de manière équitable aux produits de santé contre la Covid-19, tout en soutenant aussi les systèmes de santé. En 2 ans, des résultats majeurs ont été obtenus grâce à ACT A. 1,1 milliard de doses de vaccins ont été livrées dans le monde à des pays qui, sinon, en auraient été privés. 148 millions de tests Covid-19 ont été mis à disposition de ces pays et un appui précieux en traitement et en oxygène, grâce à United notamment, leur a été apporté. La France, comme ses partenaires européens, elle soutient pleinement ACT A. Nos contributions financières en faveur des piliers vaccins, traitements, connecteurs de systèmes de santé, mais aussi du sujet central du renforcement des capacités de production en témoignent. Nous avons ainsi alloué 410 millions d'euros aux différents piliers d'ACT A jusqu'à maintenant, dont 50 millions d'euros aux connecteurs de systèmes de santé qui seront versés très bientôt à l'OMS. Nos dons de vaccins, sujet que nous portons depuis le début de la crise, sont aussi l'illustration de notre volonté d'accélérer l'accès équitable à ces derniers. Sur les 120 millions de doses que la France donnera d'ici mi-2022, 60 millions ont déjà été livrés à 95% via COVAX. Mais nous devons aujourd'hui plus que jamais nous remobiliser afin de conduire notre mission à son terme et vaincre la pandémie. Pour cela, nous aurons besoin d'ACTA et de la contribution de tous les acteurs concernés en portant haut les principes qui font la force de notre initiative. Une action globale et cohérente, car aucun pilier seul ne viendra à bout de la pandémie. Une approche qui donne toute leur place aux pays du Sud, à la société civile, et une attention particulière au renforcement des systèmes de santé, à l'impact de notre action sur le terrain, notamment en soutenant les campagnes de vaccination lorsque cela est nécessaire. La France contribuera à ce mouvement, notamment au travers de sa présidence du Conseil de l'Union européenne. Dans le cadre de celle-ci est organisée ce 9 février à Lyon une réunion des ministres européens des Affaires étrangères et des ministres européens de la Santé sur les questions de santé, où ACTA et notre mobilisation collective seront au cœur des débats. Je remercie les coprésidents sud-africains et norvégiens de leur implication, du travail réalisé pour identifier les besoins pour 2022 et pour bâtir une stratégie financière qui soit globale. La France soutient cette démarche, elle se mobilisera cette année encore pour contribuer à la riposte mondiale à la Covid-19. Je vous remercie. Très bons travaux à vous.
Thank you for your important message, Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne, and thank you to France for being a strong supporter of ACT Accelerator since its inception. I would like to thank all participants for your support to ACT Accelerator's work and to the launch of the advocacy campaign. This pandemic continues to evolve, and we need to be agile and evolve our response with it. The ACT Accelerator is the best mechanism to bring this crisis to an end. We now have time for a few questions before we wrap up. And over to you, Margareta.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros, and to all the panelists for such powerful and important interventions. We only have a few minutes. We have a hard stop at 1600. I know there are a lot of journalists on the online and on queue, so I'll be quick. And the first question goes to Anne Usher from Development Today. Anne, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Margaret. Can you hear me?
Very well. Please go ahead.
This question is mainly for Dr. Tedros, please. Increasingly in my research, I am hearing from epidemiologists and other public health experts that with Omicron's rapid spread around the world, large parts of the population in countries with low vaccination rates have already been exposed to the virus. There is, of course, uncertainty because of the lack of testing, but many are saying that if people have already been infected with the virus, the need for vaccines may be lessening. They suggest that scarce resources might be better spent on massively increasing testing capacities and access to the new treatments, especially for high risk and older adults. Given that the ACT A budget was drawn up before the emergence of Omicron, do you see a need to rethink the balance in ACT A's funding priorities? And is, for example, the 70% vaccination target still valid in a situation where resources are so scarce? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. I think we'll start with Dr. Bruce Aylward, the lead for WHO on ACT Accelerator, especially as you discussed the financing issue. And I think Dr. Tedros may want to add. Over.
Thank you very much, Anne. I think first and foremost, the most powerful weapon that we have in the fight against not just Omicron, but variants in general and this virus are vaccines. We need to use them to the degree possible to get us out of this crisis and secure a safe future going forward. So 70% coverage very much remains the target. We must remember as well that when people talk about Omicron, that's the virus we're fighting today. We have to be thinking about the variants that are in front of us, and those are going to require high vaccination coverage and the most resilient, let's say, immunity we can bolster in the populations. And as you well know, we've also seen with other variants and this one that just because you've been exposed to one doesn't mean you're protected against the others. So there are multiple rationale for ensuring we fully use these vaccines, these tools. To your other point, though, and that's even more important, is to beat the enemy, you've got to know your enemy, be able to see your enemy, and we do indeed have to get testing rates way up, we've got to get sequencing rates way up, and we've got to be able to protect people who then suffer the consequences with the treatments. And as the Director General has said repeatedly, we shouldn't be making the choices. The world can afford to pay what it costs to support all of these tools. We should not be making the choices between them because it's a false economy and a false choice.
Thank you, Dr. Aylward. The next question will go to Laurent from Swiss News. Laurent, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. That's a question for the Norwegian Prime Minister, if he's still online.
Yeah. He is.
So, Prime Minister, very
please
good.
Go ahead.
Prime Minister, the difference between the rich and the poor countries was again mentioned at the beginning of this session. And in the rich country, we see more and more restriction being relaxed and the attention focusing on the economic recovery rather than funding the global effort. So are you concerned that this new step in the rich countries right now in the pandemic might jeopardize the success of the call you're launching today? Thank you.
I think that's a very valid question. If we look at the case of Norway, we have lifted numerous restrictions, as have Denmark and Sweden, because we are in the phase in the pandemic where the cost of the restrictions really outweigh the burden on the health service. So each country has to make its judgment on that national call. If that leads to a sentiment that the pandemic is behind us and that this global approach, mobilizing resources for protecting ourselves and others through this solidarity equity approach, there is danger. And that's one reason why Norway keeps engaging in ACT A, because we feel it's our moral obligation, in a global community as a solidarity act. But also, this is pretty hard politics self-interest, because we know that although we now lift restrictions, we are vulnerable, as was documented by the Omicron variant coming in. The biggest outbreak to date of the Omicron actually occurred in the middle of my home city, Oslo, just a few days after it emerged from South Africa. We learned a lot from South Africa on the data of Omicron. So we know that it is more contaminating more, but with less danger. So this is a national handling. But we believe that in order to avoid what you are underlining here, we need to really mobilize political leaders to see that global responsibility. They both have a moral responsibility to do so. But really, in order to reduce the likelihood of being surprised by a new variant around the next corner, I think every government in countries that are now taking down restrictions should be, self-informed to stay committed. And although, I admit that this sum of billions of dollars is a large number, but if you really kind of distribute that on high income, middle income countries, it is absolutely bearable. We can do this. And I think the fruits of that investment are so important to all of us that we really should stay on. So for my part, we will rather step up our activities in the global advocacy for ACT A than taking that down in line with fewer restrictions on Norwegians, if you get my point.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Sture. The next question comes from Sophie McKenna from South African Broadcasting Commission. Sophie, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you so much. My question is directed at President Ramaphosa, if he is still there, and Prime Minister of Norway, including Dr. Tedros. This year, are we likely to see a different approach from the developed North in terms of helping the developed South? The current political, security, and economic challenges in regions such as Africa points to the fact that if these issues are not addressed as a result of the pandemic that has led to despondency, we are likely to see the citizens of Africa being restless. Are we likely to see a political will from the developed North this time around?
Thank you, Sophie. President Ramaphosa is not online, but I think Prime Minister Sture is ready to answer that one.
Thank you for that question. I think I touched upon it in my last intervention. Let's be honest. It's not self-evident that leaders in the North, if you put it that way, will respond in the way you now call for, which I fully support. But it is achievable and it's possible, and we need to do advocacy to reach that goal. Again, that's why I have engaged spending time on supporting ACT A. Now, there are a number of events coming up where countries in the North will be gathered, partly with other partners in G20. There will be G7. There will be the upcoming different UN gatherings. And, having worked with WHO in the past to see how good advocacy on very attractive health investments, global health, public goods, have achieved results. I'm confident we can do the same this time. We can come up with text to the final communiques of the G7 and the G20s and all the rest that really highlight how this kind of investment is of public health interest, security interest, and development interest. So that's the way you have to bring home the argument to leaders that it is really in their interest to stay committed and be engaged. If we have some kind of sleepwalking out of a short-sighted view on your national Omicron challenge, around the next corner you may be very badly surprised. So we have to just keep up the advocacy with new and innovative arguments, and I'm confident we can do that because the mutual interest here between North and South, countries with different development challenges, is so great that we simply cannot fail.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister.
Dr.
Tedros, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, especially the last 2 years, the advocacy really helped. If we can compare what we have achieved this time to the past, for instance, treatment against HIV arrived in Africa 10 years after it started being used in the north. And the other tragic example is the H1N1 epidemic, which actually had also some interventions in terms of vaccine development, but the vaccines developed actually arrived in Africa after the pandemic was over. So if you compare what is happening now with the past, I think the arrival of vaccines is just a few months apart. There is improvement, although still we don't think that it's enough. And the arrival of other tools is also has improved. But we shouldn't settle on improvements. We should really do the right things. And that's why I fully agree with Prime Minister Sture that we should continue to advocate, because this is a common threat, the current pandemic, and we need to fight it together. That's why we say we call this campaign Act Together. It affects the whole world, and as Prime Minister said, it's in the interest of each and every country to work together. I think a common threat has to be fought only in unison. So I think we have learned our lessons from this, and we need to continue learning from this unprecedented crisis and prepare for the future also all the investments in the North and South based on this principle. It's a common threat that can affect everything, health, economy, social, political, and security issues. So we have to, in the investment also, we have to see it that way. In terms of the funding, for instance, the gap we're saying $16 billion now. I was talking to some finance ministers a few months ago, and they say this is actually a rounding error when we, when we draw our budgets and so on. It's not really a big amount of money. And if there is commitment, I think it can be done. It can be done. And we're not asking really something that's not doable. If the finance ministers call it a rounding error, I don't think they're wrong, because that's their job. Actually, they know it very well. But the key is the commitment, as Prime Minister said, and understand that this is a shared problem or a common threat that has to be fought together, and that it's in the interest of each and every country. And I underline, it's not charity. It's not charity. And like Norway did and other countries, I said earlier, they have already contributed their fair share, and they can do even more. If each and every country that can pay can do its fair share, I think we will be there. Thank you. And back to you, Margareta.
I think Dr. Aylward's got... Nope, that's it. Okay, we have run out of time. I apologize. But so I'm actually going to go back to you, Dr. Tedros, for your final remarks.
I would like to say thank you. This event has been marked by strong support for the ACT Accelerator and the global COVID response from leaders across the world. We heard that many countries are under immense pressure to secure and deliver vaccines, tests, treatments, and PPE for their citizens who are currently without access. From others, there were renewed commitments to use international events, including the G7, the G20, and the Global COVID-19 Summit, to drive immediate action to end the acute phase of the pandemic for everyone, everywhere. Time is of the essence, and our global collaboration is crucial to stop the virus. We close with a short video that sets out the case for investing in the ACT Accelerator. Thank you for joining today, especially to Prime Minister Sture and all who have joined. And please, can you play the ACT video?
Yes, I think it's coming now.
COVID-19 has affected us all, but tests, treatments, and vaccines still aren't available to everyone who needs them. This inequality is making the pandemic last longer. COVID-19 will cause 5 million more people to die needlessly and cost the world over $5 trillion by 2026. But we can turn it around if we act together. With an investment of $23.4 billion, the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator can support countries to reach their vaccination goals and achieve the 70% coverage target, ensure 120 million COVID-19 patients have access to treatments, perform at least one test per 1,000 people daily, and keep 2.7 million healthcare workers safe with personal protective equipment. Expanding access will save the lives of millions, ensure global health security, and drive economic recovery. It's time for governments to fully fund the ACT Accelerator for a more equitable, secure, and healthy world for all.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.